spell them or how hard it is to pronounce them or how powerful the words are. Folks, it's impossible to overestimate the importance of the events that we're looking at this week and probably next week, because I don't think we're going to get through with it. This is the only durable message of hope ever given to mankind. And it's kind of a sweeping statement if you just think about it. He's alive. How many times have we heard that? He's alive. We proclaim it. He's alive. But think about what that really means. Jesus is alive right now. We talked about his crucifixion. We talked about him dying. He sacrificed his life for us. But folks, he's not dead. When you have a loved one pass away, we mourn their death, don't we? They're not here with us anymore. If that person's a saved person, though, they're with Jesus, right? I don't look at death. I have been told that I'm kind of callous when it comes to funerals and stuff like that. I don't look at death the way other people look at death. If they're a saved person, I know I'm going to see them again. Yeah, I'm sad they're not here with us anymore. I may be sad that I can't do things with them anymore. But folks, if that person was a child of God and a believer, they are with Jesus right now. Exactly. So when you say he's alive, folks, he's alive. And one day we're going to be with him. I'm going to tell you right now, when I die, if I die and y'all are still alive, you can cry for 5 minutes. That's it. That's all I'm going to give you. I'm going to put a timer on it. I won't get that much probably from a lot of people, you're right. Folks, because I am in the best place that I could possibly be. I'm in the place that I've been trying to get to. Over the years, men have gathered, a lot of people have gathered a following, okay? Perhaps they've even spoken insightful truths and established themselves as religious leaders. And many of these men were killed for what they had taught. But Jesus Christ is unique, and that's what I want us to focus on this morning. When you say he's alive, I want you to focus on that unique statement. Jesus died for others, and Paul taught in Romans chapter 5:7 that human beings may do as much for each other. Turn over to Romans 5:7 and let's read what Paul says about that. Because I've mentioned this before, you know, I should have had it marked, I apologize. Romans 5:7. Paul says, "For scarcely for a righteous man will one die, yet peradventure for a good man some would even dare to die. But God commendeth this love toward us in that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us." Now, you've heard me say that there's only two people that's ever given their life up for you. An American soldier and Jesus Christ, right? Here's why, you know, that's a good statement to make as a veteran and stuff, but here's why that's not accurate. That American soldier died for his country, died so that we could be free, yes. That American soldier never took his life back up. He never resurrected himself. Jesus died not just for Americans. He died for everybody. And he died for sinners. But you know what Jesus could do that American soldier couldn't do? He told his disciples 3 days later, "I'm going to rise." We even say it. He's alive. See, that's where the human ability ends. We may lay down our lives, but we don't have the power to take it up again. That's the difference. The resurrection of Jesus was not a private matter that was done in the presence of just special people either. You know, the resurrection, folks, was a public event, and it was witnessed by many reliable people and witnesses. After the resurrection, Jesus was seen by a crowd of over 500 people. We've got very reliable and accurate testimony about this event, which not only changed history, but it also changed the hope of every person on earth. If Jesus did what he said he did, and he rose from the dead, folks, that means we have real hope. The future is not a series of declining days that leads to darkness. When you talk to people nowadays, especially if they watch the news every night, they're depressed. The world's going down big time. It's just got to get up and do it all over again. Exactly. Well, I agree with that, but also the Bible tells us things are going to get worse. So what does that should tell us? If we believe the Bible and we believe what it says and we believe that Jesus died for us and rose again for us and took his life up and he is alive and we have hope, why are we so depressed as Christians all the time? We shouldn't be. The future should be as bright as the promises of God. Jesus is there. He's on the other side of death. And he's waiting to welcome all of his children home. And that's the wonderful promise of resurrection. And of the verses that we're going to look at this morning. Okay? Mark chapter 15, look at verse 42. Mark says, "And now when the evening was come, because it was the preparation, that is, the day before the Sabbath, that Joseph of Arimathea, an honorable counselor, which also waited for the kingdom of God, came and went in boldly unto Pilate and craved the body of Jesus. And he bought fine linen and took him down and wrapped him in the linen and laid him in a sepulchre which was hewn out of rock and rolled a stone into the door of the sepulchre." We hear the story and we read about Jesus' burial, but folks, I want us to look into the burial, what actually really happened here. Because there's a lot of information in just these 3 verses that I think gets overlooked. There's several important lessons from the burial of Jesus. First, okay, I want you to understand the Romans would not bury a body if they weren't certain that the person was dead. The Romans actually had detachments of people that their job was after a battle to go onto the battlefield and anybody they found alive to go ahead and kill them. That's their only purpose in the battle. As Denny, I was watching something on Gettysburg this weekend. We have definitely got to set that trip up, man. But after a battle in the Civil War, after the battle was over, there would actually be guys, kind of like these Roman centurions, that would go out, but instead of killing everybody, they'd go out and make sure that, hey, there wasn't nobody that was just laying there that was still alive. And actually, in some battles, you might be on the north and I might be on the south, and we might be able to see each other, but we're out there recovering. Hey, Bill, we're not going to shoot each other right now. I'm going to take Johnny over here, and you're going to take Billy, and y'all are going to just go your way. But these Roman centurions, some of their job was just to go out there and kill. They had the grisly job of going out there after the battlefield and to kill all the wounded that remained. There was absolutely no doubt that Jesus was dead. I find it very interesting. Verse 43, Mark writes, "Joseph of Arimathea, an honorable counselor," he points that out. He's an honorable counselor, "which also waited for the kingdom of God." So he was a believer. He points that out to us. But then Mark says he went boldly unto Pilate. What do you think that word means, boldly? The crucifixion had already happened. This guy probably didn't have any right, but he goes up to Pilate and says, "Hey, I want the body. Can I have the body?" I doubt that ever happened with crucifixion because crucifixion was a very slow death. Pilate was actually surprised that Jesus was still alive. And then I also find out in verse 43 is very interesting that Mark points out that Joseph of Arimathea, not only did he go boldly to Pilate, but it says he craved the body of Jesus. Craved. We call that a hankering down south. You ever got a hankering for anything? You ever craved something? You wanted something, but you didn't know if you could have it? This guy went boldly unto Pilate, and he craved the body of Jesus. Now, why did he do that? Well, the next thing we notice is the timing of the burial. You see, the Sabbath following the Passover was quickly approaching. And this was a high day in Israel, and the site of the crucifixion had to be cleared for this observance. And correct me if I'm wrong, Denny, but the Sabbath actually began at sunset on the previous day. These guys didn't have a lot of time before the Sabbath started, because once the Sabbath started, you couldn't do nothing. You couldn't make any preparations. You couldn't do any work. On that day, preparation was made for the Sabbath. And the law forbade people to work. It forbade them to clean. It forbade them to travel very far. No work or preparation could be done. It had to be done the day before. And of course, this routine preparation was delayed because of the crucifixion. While they should have been preparing for the Sabbath, Jesus was being crucified. They had a crucifixion that was happening. So once the crucifixion was over, now that preparation had to continue, because starting at 6 o'clock, nobody can do any more work. It's over with. What would have happened to Jesus' body if Joseph hadn't went up there and craved the body and said, hey, we got to get this guy in the ground? His body would have laid out in the open, or probably dumped where they dumped other people who was crucified. We'll get to that in a minute. This had to be done. You know, it's funny, kind of ironic, not funny. It's ironic, though. Does death ever come when we want death to come? When a loved one dies, they die before we really expect it. It's never at a convenient time, is it? Death often invades our lives. But in one way or another, life has to go on. The day-to-day chores of living have to be done. We see how God had prepared the hearts of two men on the council to take care of the body of Jesus. If Joseph and Nicodemus had not acted, the body of Jesus would probably have been taken to a valley of Gehenna and disposed of as garbage. Think about that. We read about the involvement of Nicodemus in John's account, John chapter 19, verses 38 through 42. That's why I mentioned Nicodemus just now. Joseph was a very wealthy man. And where he was from, Arimathea, was north of Jerusalem. And he had purchased a sepulcher, or rock-hewn tomb, in the garden near Golgotha. And this was to be a burial place for a family, and normally it was used for generations. So when Mark says he acted boldly, these men acted boldly and swiftly, and they were a very important and vital part of the overall plan of God. A lot of people, if you mention the name Joseph of Arimathea, probably couldn't even tell you who he was. He went to Pilate and he asked for the body. Pilate gave an official release, and these men quickly took the body and prepared it for burial. They were constrained by the time, though, because, once 6 o'clock came that afternoon, they couldn't do anything else. So they couldn't completely prepare the body for burial. It was getting late. So they wrapped the body in linen burial cloths, placed it in a sepulcher, and a huge stone was rolled over the entrance to seal the tomb. I got a question for you. I know you'll be able to answer it, but every time the answer is just amazing to me. When Jesus arose, and we'll get to this later on in the lesson, probably next week too, but when Jesus arose, why did the angels, why did they have to roll the stone away? You ever thought about that? Why? So Mary could come in. It wasn't so that Jesus could get out. It was so that, I just find that pretty amazing. Because later on, Jesus walked through walls and doors, and he didn't need that stone opened, but Mary needed it rolled away so she could get in. If the body of Jesus had not been buried in a specific and obvious way, folks, the resurrection could have been questioned. See, Jesus was buried in a definite and distinct place. Pilate released the body to Joseph with full assurance from his soldiers that Jesus was dead. The body was literally secured in a stone vault that no one could enter or leave. And if you read Matthew's account in chapter 27, verses 62 through 66, you see that the rulers of Israel, they also went to Pilate and requested that an armed guard be posted at the grave so that the followers of Jesus couldn't steal the body and then claim that he had been resurrected. And Pilate agreed to that, and the tomb of Jesus was made as secure as men could possibly make it. Let's look at Mark chapter 16, verses 1 through 7. Mark says, "And when the Sabbath was past, Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James, and Salome, had bought sweet spices that they might come and anoint him. And very early in the morning, the first day of the week, they came unto the sepulchre at the rising of the sun. And they said amongst themselves, Who shall roll us away the stone from the door of the sepulchre?" That's why I asked you, why did the angels roll the stone away? It wasn't so that Jesus could get out, folks. It was so that the girls could get in. Women, don't get mad at me right now, okay? But I think guys are a little bit stronger than women. They didn't have any men with them to roll the stone away. And not only that, it was also being guarded, wasn't it, by a Roman soldier. And these women said amongst themselves, Who shall roll us away the stone from the door of the sepulchre? And when they looked, they saw that the stone was rolled away, for it was very great. That means it was heavy, folks. It was big. And entering into the sepulchre, they saw a young man sitting on the right side, clothed in a long white garment, and they were frightened. I would be too if I walked into a grave and there's somebody sitting in there. And he saith unto them, Be not affrighted. Ye seek Jesus of Nazareth, which was crucified. He is risen. He is not here. Behold the place where they laid him. But go your way, tell his disciples and Peter that he goeth before you into Galilee. There shall ye see him as he said unto you. There is a lot in these 7 verses that needs to be looked at versus just reading them over and saying, yep, he's risen. The Sabbath, and if you think about it, was probably the saddest Sabbath ever in all of history. Passed uneventful. Early in the morning of the first day of the new week, 3 ladies went to the tomb with heavy hearts to perform a very unpleasant duty if you think about what they were fixing to do. Think about this. These women had to have been moved by love. They had to have been moved by faith, and they had to have been moved of a duty. They loved Jesus. They wanted to see his burial ritual completed because it was hastily done the day before the Sabbath. They had to get him in the ground. They could have reasoned that he was dead and that it didn't make any difference what happened to his body. How many times have we said that? I've even said it. When I die, don't do anything fancy for me. I don't need a $12,000 coffin or anything like that. Just put me in a pine box, put me in the ground, and I'll be happy. Julie says she's going to burn me up, though, and carry me around on her neck or something. You're going to put me on a shelf with the dogs. If you ever come to our house, we've got 4 canisters as you walk in the door. There's 4 dogs on my shelf. My thoughts exactly. Anyway, they could have just said he's dead already. What does it matter? But folks, they were moved by love and devotion. They were acting in faith. They did not know how the stone was going to be removed. They didn't know how they were going to gain access to the body of Jesus. They just went. But they trusted that the Lord was somehow going to make a way for them to enter the tomb. That's faith there. You ever tried doing something you knew you probably couldn't do, but you went ahead and tried doing it anyway because you just had faith it was going to get done? These ladies had faith. And if you think this wasn't a pleasant task that they were fixing to do, folks, Lazarus' body had been properly prepared, if you remember that. But after a few days, his body had begun to stink, is what the scripture tells us. These ladies were fixing to go in to Jesus' body, who had been in the grave, and they were going to unwrap his stinking body and anoint it with the oils and stuff and properly prepare that. It wasn't a very good task that they were fixing to do. But they were moved by love and duty to show their respect to someone who had been a blessing to them. Now, it's important to note here that even though Jesus had specifically taught his disciples that he would die and would be resurrected after 3 days, none of these men were present. None of them had the unction to get up and go. Like so many, they had heard the words, but they didn't change their behavior. And I think there's a lot of Christians like that today. He's alive. He's alive. Why ain't we changing our behavior if we really believe that? The thing that worried the women the most was the large stone. That's what they didn't worry about how stinking he was going to be or how deterioration the body was going to be or how hard it was. They were worried about who was going to move the stone away for them. But the large stone wasn't a problem at all. And when they got to the tomb, they found the stone rolled away. Their concern had been totally without merit. God had already solved that problem for them. What a wonderful lesson for everyone who worries about the future. God's already worked out our problems for us. Are we going to have problems? Sure. Are we going to come through them? God, if you got faith in God, God will take you through it. So they entered the tomb and they saw a young man. Holy moly. I don't know about y'all. I'd probably have to go get a new pair of underwear if that happened. You're going into a grave and you're expecting to see a dead body, and lo and behold, there's a young man sitting in there. They were naturally afraid to see anyone alive sitting in a tomb. But this angel told them not to be afraid. He knew that they were looking for Jesus. And he told them plainly that he was not in the grave. Behold, he's not here. That's what the guy said to him. That's what the angel said to him. He's risen. And he encouraged the women to examine the place where Jesus had been laid and make sure for themselves that the tomb was empty. Look. Take a look for yourselves. Do your own NCIS investigation. He's not here. The angel told them to go and tell the disciples and Peter. I find that interesting that he said and Peter. That Jesus was doing exactly what he said he would do. And the disciples would meet Jesus again in Galilee. The Word of God had been proven. Folks, Jesus was alive. And he's alive forevermore. And we're going to stop right here because I want to continue this lesson on the next week. I don't want us to rush through it. But if Jesus said he was going to rise 3 days later, and he was going to meet you in Galilee, I think I'd be in Galilee waiting on him if I really believed. I find that interesting. These women got up. They had so much love and devotion that they were fixing to go do a very unpleasant task. I would not have been going to do that task if Jesus had told me that he was going to meet me in Galilee 3 days later. I'd be on the next bus to Galilee. Mainly because I don't want to do a task like that to begin with, but if he said he was going to meet me there, that's where I'm going to meet him. We'll finish the appearance of Jesus next week because he just, like I said, this was a very public event. Not just a few people witnessed it. He appeared to over 500 people in a crowd. Folks, it's Christmas time. We got the greatest gift ever given to us. He also gave us the greatest gift himself. When we say he's alive, he's risen, we better say that with some enthusiasm. Lord, thank you for the day. Thank you for many blessings. Just ask and pray, dear and Father, to be with the rest of the service. I pray that if somebody is here that doesn't know you, they come to know you for us eternally too late today, Lord. Just be with our prayer requests. Forgive me of my sins and where I failed you and all these things I ask and pray in Jesus' name.